Welcome back, everybody, to the Bears Pod with Parker Hurley. I'm your host, Parker Hurley. It is a Thursday, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. We're here on Monday, special episode reacting to the draft, but we're back on Thursday for our typical time slot. So check out everything we do at beargoggleson.com. Follow me at Parker Hurley and tune in, like I said, every Tuesday and Thursday. We're talking NFL draft today. We're going to be talking, for the most part, my 5 biggest winners and losers from the Chicago Bears. And as always, if you want to dictate how the conversation goes, leave a comment in the comment section and we will discuss that immediately on the show. Also, if you leave some comments, if you're listening back after the live recording, if you leave some comments on the show, we will definitely discuss them. First thing on this show, we got our man I am Skokes is here. Says bear down. We're talking Chicago Bears. We're going to be talking our 5 winners and losers. We also, like I said, as Skokes comments, as we had a comment from Tuesday's episode, I'm going to react to Tuesday's comment. Right now, it was Do It All 36. Something we talked about last episode. Do It All 36 said, "Why am I trying to carry the narrative that they are not all in on Justin Fields? If they wasn't, they would have grabbed one of these quarterbacks this year. They may never have an opportunity to get the top quarterback coming out again." And honestly, when I listened back to the last episode, I thought that was in a way what I was saying. I think what I'm realizing is that whatever side you are on the Justin Fields conversation, they're both going to lead to the same roads, and both sides are just getting argumentative about the phrasing. And it seems like everybody just wants to have, like I said, I think it's just the phrasing is, are the Chicago Bears all in on Justin Fields, or are the Chicago Bears making sure there's no excuses for Justin Fields? And based on which way you phrase it is based on, you're all in on Justin Fields or you're not all in on Justin Fields. And I'm saying the Chicago Bears are all in on Justin Fields, but they're not. They have a possibility to where if Justin Fields does struggle this season, and if they do pick top 5, top 10, now they have no excuses to the point where they're saying, we gave you offensive line, this, that, the other. And as we're talking about the offensive line, we have Ryan Main here leaving a comment saying that he thought Peter Skaronski was the consensus. Curious what I think about Darnell Wright as the pick who was on the board. And this actually, if you go to beargoggleson.com, this gives me a great chance to plug my website and something that I just published not very long ago. I wrote why Ryan Poles was basically out on Peter Skaronski. And now that we have clear eyes and see how the draft went, we can say that Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears never had Peter Skaronski on their board, and they never viewed him as a tackle from day one. And this actually is something, if you listen to past podcasts, that I definitely said. I said, I think most of the NFL teams view Peter Skaronski as a guard instead of a tackle. And it comes down to the fact that his arm length, and it comes down to the reality of people will say, oh, Braden Smith had short arms and he was a good guard or a good tackle. There have been good tackles with that short of arm. And I say, he could be a good tackle. Skaronski could be a good tackle, but the arm length was always going to hinder him from being an elite tackle. And they believe that Darnell Wright has the upside to be an elite tackle. Whereas Peter Skaronski, because he's physically limited, there's nothing that they can teach him, show him, or do with him that's going to make him elite at tackle. At guard, a lot of people believe that he could be an elite NFL guard. So do you want an elite guard or do you want a good tackle? And a lot of these NFL teams are saying we want an elite guard. And it goes back to an article that Dan Pompei just wrote on The Athletic. Pompei's like a really good friend with he's a really good friend with Peter Skaronski's family, actually, because Peter Skaronski is local to Chicago. Dan Pompei has covered the Bears for forever. He actually knows Peter Skaronski's family. He was with Peter Skaronski throughout most of the draft process, and on draft day wrote a really great article. And he wrote that at the Chicago Bears, or at the Northwestern, or first he wrote that at the NFL Combine, he listed the number of teams Skaronski met with. He did not list the Chicago Bears. Then he listed the teams that he met with at the Pro Day, and he said that he met with the Chicago Bears offensive line coach at the Northwestern Pro Day. Ryan Poles was at the Northwestern Pro Day, so he didn't meet personally with Peter Skaronski. Maybe he was there for Ade Adebawore instead, but Chris Morgan met with Skaronski. Ryan Poles did not meet with Skaronski at the Northwestern Pro Day. And then it actually came out in that article that Peter Skaronski got invited to Halas Hall for a pre-draft visit The only reason he got invited was because local visits do not count against the 30 pre-draft visits. You're only allowed to invite 30 players pre-draft to Hallis Hall unless they're at a local college or high school. Peter Skaronski, being from Northwestern, got to visit Hallis Hall, and it didn't count against those 30. And Dan Pompei wrote that Chris Morgan guided a 2-hour tour of Skaronski around Hallis Hall, and Peter Skaronski never met with Ryan Poles during that 2-hour tour. That tells you firmly and clearly that Poles didn't meet with him at the combine, went to the Northwestern Pro Day and didn't meet with him, and then they brought him to Chicago and he still didn't meet with him. So it's stunning when you think, or it's not stunning because of the arm length is one of the very high traits that Ryan Poles values as a tackle, and he doesn't view Skaronski as a tackle, and he never did. And you could argue that they maybe brought him in for Chris Morgan to get his hands on interview, but maybe that was more of a smokescreen, whereas Ryan Poles is doing something else. He obviously was doing something else, not meeting Skaronski, whereas the rest of the NFL thought that during that 2-hour period, Skaronski was with the Chicago Bears. So, and then you go to the idea that Ryan Poles was at the Senior Bowl and met with Darnell Wright, physically was there with him. Luke Getsy coached Darnell Wright. They had Darnell Wright at the combine. They brought Darnell Wright in, and so you think this wasn't one of those extra visits. This was an actual 30 visit. They flew to Tennessee and met Darnell Wright. There was obvious interest in Darnell Wright, and there was no interest in Peter Skaronski because they didn't do any homework on Skaronski. It was actually interesting, that article from The Athletic. So I urge you to check that out and urge my reaction to it from on beargoggleson.com. He says Skaronski grew up like 2 miles away from me. Said he's a Packers fan. A little weird. Now I understand because his grandfather played on Green Bay, and that is another thing that came out in that article. And actually, Skaronski said that along with the Bears, he said, I never even met Ryan Poles. And he told Dan Pompei in that article, he said, the Packers invited me because of one of the same things, because of where he grew up. And then he said that the Packers barely even gave him any time or attention. And he said that aside from the fact that he was a Packers fan, he thought that he wasted his time visiting the Packers. So that does happen, where you invite these players just because you want to show that interest in Skaronski. But it seems like the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers were not in on Peter Skaronski whatsoever. And yeah, like I said, the difference of attention that Ryan Poles gave Darnell Wright versus Peter Skaronski pre-draft, it's easier to see now. But now that you read some of these reports and you see some of these other things, and I always thought that maybe Skaronski was lower on their board because of the arm length, and now it's pretty much confirmed. And leave some more comments if you want to dictate where the chat's going. I'm going to start talking about some of the Chicago Bears winners and losers from the draft. And I go back to the comment from Do It All 36. And if you do want to leave a comment after the show, I'll react to it on the next show, like I'm doing with Do It All 36, who said that I'm pushing the narrative that the Chicago Bears are not all in on Justin Fields. All I said on the last episode was that there's nothing we can prove in 2021 that they were in on Justin Fields because they didn't invest anything in him. And I said that you could make the counter argument that they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the assets, they didn't have a first-round pick or cap space. So, and that's where I go back to. Either way, you could say, well, they weren't in on Justin Fields. Look at what they did. Or you could say they had no resources to give Justin Fields. Either way, it led to the same road. In this offseason, the same exact thing. You can say, well, now there's no excuses for Justin Fields. Now it's make or break for Justin Fields, and now they could easily get rid of Justin Fields. That's true because Justin Fields is on his rookie contract, and after this season, the Chicago Bears will have to decide on his fifth-year option. And if the Chicago Bears are picking top 5 again this season, they're going to say, listen, Justin, we gave you a right tackle, we gave you a guard, we gave you Tyler Scott, Roschon Johnson, Dante Foreman, DJ Moore, and if you're not going to take that step this year, then it still is a possibility that they could move on from him. I happen to lean on the other side where the argument would be, well, they're all in on Justin Fields because they gave him Darnell Wright, because they gave him Nate Davis, because Tyler Scott, DJ Moore, everything I just named. The argument against Justin Fields is, well, they gave him all this, and if he fails, now they got to move on. The argument for Justin Fields is, finally, they gave him all this, and now they can build around him. It's the same argument. You guys are making the same case, and it's leading to the same direction of at the end of this season, we're going to know what we have in Justin Fields. And I'm not saying if the Chicago Bears don't win the Super Bowl, they have to move on from Justin Fields. I am saying if they pick first overall next season, then it probably had something to do with Justin Fields failing. But if Justin Fields the reason that you picked first overall last season, in a lot of people's opinion, was not Justin Fields. And now you have all the pieces to where he has enough in his arsenal to where he can take that step forward. And there's that possibility that if he doesn't take that step forward, that now you don't have the excuses for him. So, and yeah, Skoke says he thinks the ultimate factor will be his stats. Need to see a big step. I think, some of the things such as, and that's definitely true, because some of the things such as a stat I'm going to be looking at is sack percentage. Okay. And a lot of people are talking about it. Justin Fields has a historic sack percentage. Justin Fields is taking a ridiculous amount of sacks. The Bears are picking number one overall because of all the sacks that Justin Fields is taking. That's one argument. The same counter argument is the offensive line is so bad. Alex Leatherwood, I keep talking about it, that he played like one game. I think it was against the Eagles. He played like 10 snaps and gave up 4 sacks or something along those lines, and they immediately had to bench him. Is that Justin Fields or is that Alex Leatherwood? You could make the case, Justin Fields is taking way too many sacks. You could make the case that he had no protection. And now they have Darnell Wright, and now they have Nate Davis. And so now it is, like I said, whether you want to say now he has no excuses, and if the sack rate stays the same, we have a serious problem, or you could say now he has the support in the surrounding cast around him that we have to believe that sack rate's going to lower. And whichever side you stand on, the reality is that Justin Fields, like I said, is a winner from this draft because he gets the chance. He deserves the chance for us to find out, and he gets the chance to say, like Skoke said, and like I said, is his sack rate going down? Is his completion rate going up? Is he playing within the structure of the offense more? And a lot of that comes down to one of the other excuses, or one of the other is, are they not all in on Justin Fields? And that's where I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying that it's potential, especially last season, it was potentially out there. In the first 6 games of the season, Luke Getsy was not calling plays to Justin Fields' strengths. And then during that Washington game, it started to switch. And then during the Patriots game, it flipped on its head and they caught the Patriots by surprise. And then the offense started to take off. And then they were trading Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn, and the defense fell apart. And so they weren't winning any games. But you could start to see that when they started to buy into Justin Fields, good things started to happen. So they're going to continue to buy into Justin Fields. And now there is, but like I said, it can't just be, well, we have to design the offense around him or specifically for him, or we only have so many gimmicky plays to run because these are the only plays that work for Justin Fields. It has to be now, okay, Justin, now we have the pieces of the offense that you're not running around in, and we have to run these gimmicky plays because otherwise you're going to get killed. Now we have the offense, and now you have to play within the offense, and we're not going to ask you to be Nate Peterman, Captain Checkdown or anything like that. But we are going to ask you to play within the offense, and we are going to ask you to get the ball out on time, and we are going to ask you that if the check down's there, we added Travis Homer, who's a passing down back. We added Roshan, who can catch the football out of the backfield. So if the pass is there, we need you to check the football down and not, take that sack because you wanted that 60-yard scramble. And every once in a while, that 60-yard scramble is great. And Matt Eberflus, one of the things that he said at the NFL Combine was, on first and second down, we want you to take the check down and we want you to play within the offense and we want you to do what we're asking you to do. On third down, be a hero, make that play, go for the sticks, whatever you need to do. Justin Fields, do that. But on first and second down, now that we have, better pass protection in terms of we have a better guard, we have a better tackle, even if Cody Whitehair is, injured, or, he's still probably better than, whatever they were shuffling in last season. And you have much better pass catchers. So there is, like I said, you could, however you want to frame it, is if people say, oh, well, he has no excuses and think that I'm framing it poorly. I'm just saying that now, if anything bad does happen next season, then you can't just say, well, the team failed him because of Darnell Wright. It's over now for that because they have a 5th-year option next season and they have to decide. And I don't think that's going to happen. I'm in that camp of they're all in on Justin Fields. They're surrounding Justin Fields with the proper talent. But either way, he's my number one winner because they had that number one pick. And like he said, they could have taken a quarterback number one. And instead they turned that into DJ Moore, Darnell Wright, and then some. And those two are immediately going to help Justin Fields. My second winner from draft weekend is Dominique Robinson. It's something we've talked about on the last podcast. Is one of the comments and one of the conversations we really got into is it? I think it made plenty of sense, and I'm not even knocking the idea that they drafted two interior defensive linemen in the second round, and I thought that was a potential possibility. I didn't think that they were going to go the whole draft without drafting an edge rusher, but I did think that it was fair that they were going to draft those two interior defensive linemen. And I do think that potentially, and one of the winners we could kind of just blaze through really quick, in my opinion, is Matt Eberflus, because Matt Eberflus, you saw with that Colts defense, the big thing that he did was, whether it was a second round pick in Darius Leonard and whether it was a big time splash into Forrest Buckner, he needed that Mac linebacker, that middle linebacker, and he needed that three technique. And those were the keys of his defense. And now he made a big splash in Tremaine Edmonds. And now with two second round picks, whether it be Pickens or Dexter, he's hoping that one of them becomes his Darius Leonard. And he has, between Tremaine Edmonds and Gervon Dexter, I think he wants that to be similar to his Darius Leonard and DeForest Buckner. So the Chicago Bears this offseason going out and getting Matt Eberflus, the obvious pieces that he has so clearly throughout his career, it's always been the three technique and it's always been the middle linebacker, even from the Cowboys, even, from the Browns way back in the day, and he's from Rob Ryan. It always goes back to that three technique and that middle linebacker. But then focusing on that three technique was a gift to Matt Eberflus, and it makes Matt Eberflus happy, and it makes Matt Eberflus say, I can work with that, and I'm going to bring the best out of these two. They still skimped on the edge rusher, and it makes Dominique Robinson look and feel like a huge winner. And he said on, I forget what podcast he was on a week or two ago, said that he put on about 10, 15 pounds of good muscle and good weight, and the Chicago Bears wanted him to put on a little bit of weight, and he did that, and he's coming into next season. And one of the things that I wrote about Dominique Robinson is that when they drafted him, he was a wide receiver about as recently as 2019. So when they drafted him, he only had about 2 seasons of MAC defensive line play. They didn't draft him for anything at all for what he could be next season. They weren't even thinking about him next season, last season for 2021 or 2022. They weren't even thinking about him. Like, he was a project last season. And because they traded Robert Quinn, because Khalil Mack was gone, because the depth started to, thin out pretty quickly, and because Dominique Robinson, in a lot of people look at, and if you look at PFF grades, and if you look at stats, and if you look at pressures, anything you look at, Dominique Robinson was awful last season, except for expectations. If you compare Dominique Robinson to your expectations of when the Chicago Bears drafted him, and you say, these are Dominique Robinson's expectations, if you compare what he did compared to that, you're actually probably saying he had a pretty good season. But when you look at, when he was on the field, he wasn't productive, this, that, the other. When they drafted him, you didn't think he was going to get on the field. And now you're saying when he was on the field, he was a failure, so he's a bust and we got to move on from him. But like I said, when they drafted him, you probably didn't expect him to get on the field very much. And a lot of the reports out of training camp were Dominique Robinson is impressing people to the point where we think he's going to get on the field next season. So what you're getting at is actually the Chicago Bears probably think last season was a win because he got on the field, and we, as such a raw former wide receiver turned defensive end who's about 15 pounds lighter than they want him to be, for that to get on the field, they're actually excited about that. And people are looking at the raw numbers and they're looking at the PFF grades saying he's a failure, he's a bust, and the Bears are saying, oh baby, he's above expectations, is potentially what's going on here. The other factor is obviously that, they could sign somebody in free agency, or Dominique Robinson shows up to training camp and then they sign somebody in free agency because they say, we thought this, that, the other could happen from Dominique Robinson this summer. He showed up to training camp. After a week, we don't buy it, we're going to sign somebody. Or after a week, we don't buy it, we're going to trade something. Or because we have serious cap space still. So the Chicago Bears still have it's just like Justin Fields. They have the potential to not be all in on Dominique Robinson. But I think where the Chicago Bears stand right now, they're saying that after his first season potentially exceeded our expectations, now heading into his second season, he was always raw. He was always upside in athleticism. In his second season, we expect him to take a serious step forward and actually be like a real contributing player who's going to make some noise for the Chicago Bears. So I think big winner Justin Fields, other winner Matt Eberflus because they got him as guys, but Dominique Robinson walking away from this weekend. And the other factor that you have to think about it is Rasheem Green didn't sign a long-term deal. Trevis Gibson is almost at the end of the road, and he's not a Ryan Poles didn't even draft him. And the more playing time he got, he was actually playing worse and worse. And he's not somebody that you say, well, next year he could be better. So I think like ships passing in the night, you're going to see Dominique Robinson slowly become that third guy, and Trevis Gibson slowly become that fourth guy. And then you say DeMarcus Walker is an inside-outside pass rusher. And now you're starting to say, wow, Dominique Robinson, if he passes Trevis Gibson and DeMarcus Walker's lining up inside every once in a while, Dominique Robinson's actually going to get some serious snaps. Or, like I said, at the very least, he has the ability to show up to training camp with the thought that he could get some serious snaps. My fourth winner is two winners, and my fourth winner is the center position, and it comes down to Cody Whitehair and Lucas Patrick. And that is something that you have to recognize. And one of the things that I said was, and I was definitely wrong about this, obviously, and when they traded up for Tyreek Stevenson, I have to admit I was sitting there saying, they just traded up for John Michael Schmitz just based on everything that I said. And if you listen to the podcast, tackle in the first round, Gervon Dexter in the second round, and somebody like John Michael Schmitz is really like a 1-2-3 that I thought that's almost perfect. And when they went Tyreek Stevenson, I kind of just chuckled and said, well, you're not going to be right all the time. You thought those first two picks went about exactly how you thought. I thought it was going to be John Michael Schmitz instead of Tyreek Stevenson. And that's a win for Cody Whitehair. And it's a win for not only Cody Whitehair, but Lucas Patrick. And that's where you have to go back to and say, that the reason that I thought they should draft a center is, first off, neither of those two, 3 years from now, I don't think either of those two are the Chicago Bears starting center. And that's why I still wonder if they should have drafted somebody. But you have to say one of the reasons that I thought so is that Cody Whitehair in 2 of the last 3 seasons has dealt with injury. His play has started to decline because he's been dealing with some of these injuries. So is he better than Sam Mustipher at center on week 1? Yes. By week 9, when he's starting to deal with ailments or things of that nature, is he still going to be better than Sam Mustipher? Or is he going, would you have rather have transitioned to a rookie by this point? But that brings me to my point that Lucas Patrick is a winner from the NFL draft because, first off, he's not going to get cut and he has about a $5 million cap hit. And he's going to be the backup center making about $5 million for the Chicago Bears next season. That's a win in itself. But the other fact is that they still trust him and think that if these issues that I've presented with Cody Whitehair come up, they actually still feel that. I think Lucas Patrick is only like 26 years old. He was only 25 when they signed him last season. So you could look at it and say, the way that I kind of looked at it and said was, well, he was a journeyman from Chicago or from Green Bay. He's only really here because Luke Getsy likes him. He got a shot at center and got injured. He played at guard and was awful. He got another shot at center and got injured again. They could save about $5 million moving on from him. Maybe it's just time to cut ties is how I saw it. They saw it as, hey, Luke Getsy bought into him. He's still 26 years old. We thought he was the center of the future as recently as a year ago. So they're much more interested in Lucas Patrick, and they're not cutting ties with the idea that Lucas Patrick could still be the center. And like I said, I think if you draft a center 5 weeks into the season, Cody Whitehair gets injured, you go with that center. They're saying 5 weeks into the season, if Cody Whitehair gets injured, we're going with Lucas Patrick. And we still think that if injuries did not happen last season, they still think that Lucas Patrick could have been locked into that starting center spot right now, and we would have never been drafting or talking about drafting a center. Skokes says that he still thinks that the trade up for Tyreek Stevenson was questionable. The CB depth was incredible. John Michael Schmitz was the next pick by the Giants, a big miss in his opinion. And that's another thing that I chuckled when they went Tyreek Stevenson. And I actually tweeted from the Bear Goggles on account. I said, I think because the Giants were tied heavily to John Michael Schmitz, I think the Bears are jumping. And because the Giants drafted Banks, the cornerback, in the first round, I thought this makes too much sense. That the Giants want their center to fall to them. The Bears just did something really savvy and they jumped him. We're obviously going to see. And one thing that I wrote is what could have been draft, just highlighting 3 or 4 guys at each pick who let's just debate and see, should the Chicago Bears have drafted that person? And one of the things that I wrote is that If you could have told Ryan Poles on Friday night that Terrell Smith would have fell to him and that he would have been able to draft a cornerback that he obviously really liked on day 3, would he have still made that aggressive move to Tyreek Stevenson? I'm sure now he would have said, "Oh yeah, sure, definitely. We were that high on Tyreek Stevenson," and it's obvious that Tyreek Stevenson was the best player on his board. But like you said, it was a very deep cornerback draft, and it's obvious that they had a high grade on Terrell Smith as well. And now you kind of look at Terrell Smith and say, was he a little bit of overkill? And it does. We only have 5 minutes, but one of the big losers that I have from the NFL draft was Kindle Vildor, because he went from he's a starter to now, when you look at the starting 3, you say, okay, Tyreek Stevenson is one of the starters. Jalen Johnson is one of the starters, Kyler Gordon. So they have their 3 starters. And now you say Terrell Smith is competing for that number 4 spot with Kindle Vildor, who thought he was going to be a starter. Now he's competing with Terrell Smith, who they're obviously pretty high on. And then you say, Josh Blackwell last season, first off, Josh Blackwell is a slot player. So he's basically Kyler Gordon's backup in the slot. Second off, Josh Blackwell was an ace on special teams last season. So, Josh Blackwell, like whoever wins that 4 spot, Josh Blackwell is the 5. Whoever loses the 4 spot doesn't just fall to the 5 spot, because Josh Blackwell, because of his special teams and backup slot duties, all of a sudden, if Kindle Vildor loses a training camp battle competition to Terrell Smith, he's the 6th cornerback, and he's potentially on his way out of here, because another UDFA, Jalen Jones, last season, because of special teams play, and he actually got a couple shots in. I know we all remember him because Justin Jefferson was torching him for one game, but Jalen Jones brings special teams. So now all of a sudden, Kindle Vildor, if you're the 6th cornerback, you better play special teams. So Jalen Jones actually plays special teams. Kindle Vildor does not. I don't think they're going to cut Kindle Vildor, but for somebody to go from starter to potential cut as fast as he did, that was a whirlwind for him. And that goes back to, like Skoke said, that it was a deep cornerback class. Ryan Poles stuck with best player available. This is what he does. His highest graded player, apparently by a long shot, was Tyreek Stevenson. And then he doubled down and said, our highest graded player by a long shot was Terrell Smith. And if that's bad news for Kindle Vildor, that's bad news for Kindle Vildor. And yeah, he went from he was the number 3 to now he's potentially the number 6 or 7, because that 5 or 6 guy plays special teams. And we're going to see if they can beat him on special teams. Another loser though that I have that I think is a sneaky loser is Kyler Gordon, and it comes back to, if they're so in love with Tyreek Stevenson that they had to trade up and that they had to, go get him, and that they're passing on a potential center of the future for him, does that say that how many times did they play 2 cornerback sets? I agree with that. But when they go 2 cornerbacks, is it Tyreek Stevenson? And is Kyler Gordon now, did he go from a full-time player to now he's just a full-time slot? And potentially that makes him a better player, because, he was learning 2 positions, outside and the slot. Are they saying now you're just focusing on the slot? But that still means that he's going to be off the field about 30% of the time. And the Chicago Bears, it's going to come down to, do you want 3 linebackers on the field or 3 cornerbacks? And, the offensive personnel is going to dictate that. But you just drafted Noah Sewell. You like what you see from Jack Sanborn. Those 2 are competing for your 3rd linebacker spot. So if any snaps that Jack Sanborn or Noah Sewell play, now I think you're starting to wonder if Kyler Gordon is going to be off the field on those snaps. So, from a 2nd round pick who was playing 100% of the snaps just last season to potentially, getting cut back, whether it be 25, 30% of the snaps, I think you have to admit that potentially Kyler Gordon is a loser, just based on how aggressive they were to not only add Tyreek Stevenson, but also Terrell Smith, who doesn't play in the slot. And it does confirm the fact that I don't think Kyler Gordon's going to play any outside snaps next season. So when they do go base, and when they do get Noah Sewell or Jack Sanborn on the field, Kyler Gordon's going to start losing some snaps. And that brings me to another loser, is Jack Sanborn. We're talking about, a couple months ago, we were saying, is he the Mike of the future? Are the Chicago Bears going to go thin at linebacker because they liked what they saw from Jack Sanborn? In comes TJ Edwards. In comes Tremaine Edmonds. And now in comes Noah Sewell. And I talked about Sewell is not going to play defensive end. They believe in Dominique Robinson as that defensive end way more than Noah Sewell. And Sewell can be a pass rusher similar to Jack Sanborn. But when they go three linebackers, it's either going to be Jack Sanborn or Noah Sewell. And there's an inside shot that Noah Sewell is going to beat, the UDFA from last season. So all of a sudden you're looking at Jack Sanborn and saying, we thought he was going to be the Mike, and now he's probably not. There's a chance that he may not, injuries obviously will impact this, but on paper, he may not be in line for a single defensive snap next season based on the drafting of Noah Sewell. So, some of the other quick losers I'll get to, Velus Jones. I just think a lot of people are commenting on my article saying, oh, Velus Jones isn't a loser. He'll contribute on special teams. I'm sitting here like, this is a third round pick from last season. Contributing on special teams means he's a loser, and they traded for DJ Moore. They traded for Chase Claypool. Darnell Mooney's in there. He couldn't beat out Equanimous St. Brown and Dante Pettis last season to get on the offensive field, and they're back. And then they drafted Tyler Scott, who's like 4 years younger than Velus Jones, and they're so much more invested in Velus Jones. You could say Velus Jones is going to contribute on special teams. To me, that means he's a loser because just like Jack Sanborn, there's a real chance that Velus Jones is hardly going to see the offensive field. Dante Foreman, I think if you asked Dante Foreman when he signed with the Chicago Bears, if he would redo that decision based on them drafting Roschon Johnson, I think he might want to redo that decision. And I think he's going to get a fair amount of snaps. That's the other, he's going to get his fair amount of snaps. I know, but Roschon Johnson's going to eat into his snaps, and I don't think he thought that was going to happen on draft weekend. So those were my big losers. A couple of my final winners, Larry Borum and Alex Leatherwood. I mean, they could have drafted another depth tackle. I easily saw that coming. And the fact that they didn't makes me think that Borum will be the swing tackle and that Leatherwood has an outside shot to make the roster. So I think we're going to talk about Darnell Wright on Tuesday. We're going to talk more Chicago Bears then. Follow me at Parker Hurley. Leave some comments because we did react to a comment from last episode on this episode. So leave some comments if you're not watching this live. Follow me at Parker Hurley. Follow us at beargoggleson.com. Tuesday at 6 o'clock Eastern. We'll be back for another half hour of Chicago Bears discussion.